Italy is famous for many things, including pizza, pasta, gelato, art, fashion, cars, and of course ancient ruins. But it's not so well known for its dangerous supervolcanoes. That is until now, because a new study suggests that the Italian city of Naples could be sitting atop a supervolcano time bomb. Let's start with what makes this volcano special, because supervolcano isn't a term you hear every day. Supervolcanoes are volcanoes that have the potential to cause an eruption with a volcanic explosivity index, or VEI, of 8. For context, most large volcanic eruptions in recent history, like Mount St. Helens in 1980 and Mount Pinatubo in 1991, are between 3 and 6 on this scale. The largest eruption in recorded history, Krakatoa in 1883, was a 7. And 8 is basically the threshold for an extinction-level event. Luckily, there aren't that many supervolcanoes in the world. As of 2021, there were only about 12 identified candidates. So far, though, they've only been found in places like Yellowstone National Park and New Zealand, nowhere near any major cities. Except now, maybe Naples. The city lies just 10 miles from Mount Vesuvius, the volcano best known for destroying the Roman city of Pompeii in 79 AD. Scientists have long considered Vesuvius an ordinary volcano rather than a supervolcano, but a new paper published in the journal Quaternary Science Reviews challenges that idea. It looks at the history of the entire region and argues that we should think of Vesuvius as one part of a much larger caldera, an enormous crater that formed after a massive ancient eruption. If these researchers are right, Naples is perilously close to a supervolcano that hasn't erupted in thousands of years, but which could blow again at some point in the future. To understand how we got here, we need to go back to the beginning and find out how the supervolcano formed. Before we had the modern Vesuvius, we had a large magma chamber beneath what is now the Bay of Naples. Eventually, this magma chamber created a massive volcano. But around 15,000 years ago, something happened that scientists don't totally understand. Part of the volcano collapsed. This may have been due to pressure from the magma chamber below or shifting tectonic plates above. Either way, the collapse caused a huge explosion, ejecting about 500 cubic miles of material and forming the vast caldera we call the Bay of Naples today. And yes, the Bay of Naples is actually a caldera. Most caldera are just lakes, but this one filled with water from the sea. Even after all that time, it's still over 1,000 feet deep. Then about 5,000 years ago, magma started filling up this caldera once again, eventually creating the smaller Mount Vesuvius. So while Mount Vesuvius has a long history of erupting, destroying Pompeii, and covering the surrounding area in ash, according to this new research, we really should consider it part of a much larger system. And those larger systems tend to be a lot more dangerous. When a supervolcano erupts, it doesn't just spew lava. It blasts ash into the atmosphere, blocking sunlight and drastically changing global temperatures. During the 1883 eruption of Krakatoa, for example, the ash blocked out the sun in some parts of Indonesia for weeks. But it also caused temperatures around the world to drop by about 1.2 degrees Celsius. The 1980 eruption of Mount St. Helens was a much smaller event, but it still led to regional temperature changes. 2 weeks after the eruption, average daily temperatures in Washington state were about 10 degrees cooler than normal. But it's not just about temperature. Supervolcanic eruptions release huge amounts of sulfur dioxide and other gases, which can lead to acid rain. They also send shock waves around the globe, sometimes causing earthquakes and tsunamis. A super eruption at Yellowstone would devastate the surrounding region and cause major problems for the rest of the planet. And because Naples sits right next to one, it seems like the people living there might be at risk too. Well, maybe it's important to remember that although supervolcanoes are dangerous, they also take a very long time to erupt. There have been 7 potential super eruptions on Earth over the past 2 million years, and even the largest cluster of super eruptions occurred over a span of 700,000 years. Even if the Bay of Naples did erupt again, we have plenty of time to prepare. That said, predicting exactly when a supervolcano will blow has proven to be extremely difficult. For example, for a long time, scientists thought that Mount Pinatubo in the Philippines wouldn't erupt anytime soon. In the 400 years before 1991, it had only had small, infrequent steam-based eruptions. But then it blew up and became the world's most violent eruption since Krakatoa. Similarly, the history of Mount Vesuvius makes it seem like a likely candidate for another explosive event. Between 16,000 BC and 1794 AD, it had 30 major eruptions. But now it's been quiet for 228 years. And if it does erupt, we have a decent early warning system in place. Of course, this won't help us if it turns out that Vesuvius is just a front for something bigger. If the Bay of Naples did erupt, all bets are off. Naples itself would obviously be in big trouble. But what about the rest of Italy and the rest of the world? Well, that depends on a lot of things. How strong is the eruption? How tall does the ash plume get? How much sulfur dioxide is released? Unfortunately, we can't say for sure. In general, the bigger the eruption, the further the effects. The 1883 eruption of Krakatoa, which was a 7 on the VEI, affected the whole world. Meanwhile, the 1991 eruption of Mount Pinatubo, which was a 6, primarily affected nearby countries like the Philippines, Japan, and South Korea. So based on this pattern, you might assume that a supervolcanic eruption in Naples would affect the whole planet, and to some extent that's true. But localized factors like wind patterns play a big role too. For example, during the 1980 eruption of Mount St. Helens, wind currents kept most of the ash in the Pacific Northwest. On the other hand, a similar amount of ash from Mount Pinatubo landed in the Philippines, Japan, and South Korea because winds carried it across the Pacific. Basically, no two eruptions are alike. And when it comes to figuring out who or what would be affected, we really can't say for sure. Then again, most of the time, we're talking about an event that could happen thousands of years from now. At this point, it's impossible to predict the future. But luckily, science can give us some clues. So if you want to learn more about how eruptions work and what might happen if one goes supercritical, you can check out our resource. Science Explainer videos take a lot of time and money to make, but they're free for everyone forever. Our platform is made possible by our patrons and donors. With your support, we can keep making free science videos for everyone.